Writing. When Clara Bell Waverly stepped down from the eastbound stage in Mercy Crossing, the first thing the town noticed was not the dust on her skirt, nor the valise in her hand, nor the small iron lockbox she carried close to her ribs, as if it held a beating heart. They noticed the size of her. Two men outside Haskell's feed store stopped chewing tobacco. A girl sweeping the porch of the boarding house hid a laugh behind her wrist. Three women in Sunday bonnets, though it was only Thursday, turned their faces just enough to whisper without looking cruel. "She came for Gideon Holt?" one of them murmured. "He asked for a seamstress, not a flour barrel. She won't last a week out at that place." Clara heard every word. She had been hearing such words since she was 12 years old, and too broad for the dresses her mother cut from flour sacks. She had learned that some insults were meant to wound, and some were meant to measure how much dignity a woman could carry before she set it down. She did not set hers down. She placed one boot on the dry street, adjusted the cuffs of her faded blue traveling dress, and lifted her chin toward the man waiting beside a black wagon across the road. Gideon Holt looked exactly as the letter had promised, and nothing like hope. He was tall, raw-boned, and browned by years under a hard sun. His hat shadowed eyes, the color of burned coffee. A scar cut through the left side of his mouth, not deep enough to make him ugly, but deep enough to make every expression look like it cost him something. His hands rested on the wagon rail, as if he trusted wood more than people. His gaze moved over Clara once, from bonnet to boots, and stopped at her waist. The town waited for him to speak. He did. "You're larger than the agency described." A hush fell across Mercy Crossing. Even the stage horses seemed to lower their heads. Clara's fingers tightened on the handle of her valise. Then she looked straight at him. "The agency described my needlework, my bookkeeping, my ability to manage a household, repair canvas, mend tack, preserve food, and keep accounts in 2 ledgers at once," she said. "None of those skills sit in my waistline, Mr. Holt." One of the feed store men coughed hard enough to choke. Gideon's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with the first sharp spark of surprise. He had expected shame. He had expected tears. He had expected a woman who would fold under the first rough word and make it easier for him to send her back. Clara did not fold. The paper tucked in his vest pocket said she was to become his wife before sundown. Not for romance, not for courtship, not for any soft dream she had carried as a girl. It was a practical arrangement, written in ink and witnessed by a marriage broker in Topeka. A wife in name, a worker in fact, to help run Holt's ladder ranch and care for his motherless nephew, with the possibility of real marriage, if both parties agreed after 1 year. Gideon had asked for a woman who could sew, cook, keep books, and endure isolation. He had not asked for beauty. That much was plain. Clara looked past him toward the west, where the prairie rolled out yellow and endless beneath a sky so wide it made small lives feel exposed. Somewhere beyond the low hills lay the ranch she had agreed to enter. Somewhere out there was a house that needed hands, a boy who needed tending, and a man who believed usefulness was safer than affection. "Are we going to the courthouse?" Clara asked, "or are you planning to let the whole street finish inspecting me first?" That time, Gideon almost smiled. Almost. They were married by a judge who smelled of pipe smoke and ink. The ceremony lasted 6 minutes. Gideon said his vows like a man signing a receipt. Clara said hers clearly, though the judge's wife watched her with pity sharp enough to scratch. When it was done, Gideon helped Clara into the wagon with careful hands, but no tenderness. They rode out of Mercy Crossing under the punishing afternoon sun. For the first mile, neither spoke. The wagon wheels cracked over ruts, grasshoppers scattered from the road. The town shrank behind them until it was no more than a smudge of roofs and dust. Clara studied Gideon without turning her head. His coat was clean but worn at the elbows. His boots had been patched twice. A good rifle hung behind the wagon seat, but the leather sling was dry and near breaking. The horse team was underfed, not from neglect, but from hay being stretched too far. The wagon itself had one rear wheel repaired in haste with mismatched bolts. Broken things, Clara thought, not abandoned. Broken. "Your letter said the ranch runs cattle," she said. "Used to." "And horses?" "Used to." "What does it run now?" Gideon's jaw tightened. "Debt." That was the first honest thing he gave her. Holt's Ladder Ranch appeared near dusk as a cluster of tired buildings pressed against a slope of red earth. The main house had once been handsome, with a deep porch and carved trim, but weather had peeled the paint from the boards. One shutter hung crooked. The windmill stood still, though the evening breeze moved strong enough to lift Clara's bonnet ribbon. The barn roof sagged in the middle like an old back. A boy stood on the porch, holding a tin cup with both hands. He was perhaps 9 years old, thin as a fence rail, with dark hair falling into wary eyes. He wore a shirt too large at the shoulders and trousers patched at both knees. Beside him stood a yellow dog with one torn ear, watching the wagon as if prepared to defend the whole property alone. Gideon climbed down. "Eli," he said, and his voice changed. "Not much, but enough. This is Mrs. Holt." The boy stared at Clara. "She's the one from the letters?" "Yes." Eli looked at her dress, her round face, her gloved hands, her full figure. Clara waited for judgment, but children were often kinder in their cruelty than adults, because they had not yet learned to polish it. Instead, Eli asked, "Can you make biscuits?" Clara felt the first warmth of the day move through her. "I can make biscuits that rise high enough to make a hungry boy believe in mercy." The boy glanced at Gideon as if permission were needed to hope. Gideon looked away first. Inside, the house held the stale smell of closed rooms, cold ashes, and grief left too long in corners. A woman had once lived there. Clara could tell by the faded curtains, the cracked blue bowl on the shelf, the careful arrangement of dried flowers above the mantel. But no woman had tended the place for a long while. Dust lay over the piano. The kitchen floor needed scrubbing. The pantry held beans, cornmeal, salt pork, dried apples, and very little else. Clara removed her bonnet. "Where is the flour?" Gideon blinked. "You just arrived. And you have a boy watching my hands like supper depends on them." "It does," Eli said softly. So Clara cooked. She rolled up her sleeves, tied on an apron she found hanging behind the door, and set the kitchen back to life. Flour clouded the table. The stove took coaxing, then caught. She fried salt pork with onions, simmered beans with dried peppers from her own bag, and made biscuits in a cast-iron skillet blackened by years of use, but recently neglected. Eli stood in the doorway, pretending not to watch every movement. Gideon carried water, split kindling, and said almost nothing. When they sat at the table, the silence changed. It no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. Eli ate 3 biscuits before speaking. "My Aunt Ruth used to make them like this." Gideon's hand stopped halfway to his plate. Clara looked at the boy. "Was she your mother?" Eli shook his head. "My ma died when I was little. Aunt Ruth raised me after Pa got killed hauling freight. Then she got fever last spring." Gideon's face closed. Clara understood then. Gideon had not only lost a wife, Eli had lost a mother twice. "She must have loved you well," Clara said. Eli looked down at his plate. "She sang when she needed dough." Clara did not sing. Not that night. Some empty spaces deserved respect before they were filled. After supper, Gideon showed her to a small room off the back hall. "It was Ruth's sewing room," he said. "Figured you might prefer it to the main bedroom." Clara noticed the way he would not meet her eyes. The arrangement suited him. Married on paper, separate in the house, no soft expectations. "It will do," she said. He hesitated at the door. "There are account books on the desk in my office. You said in your letters you keep books." "I do. You can look tomorrow." Clara untied her gloves, revealing fingers red from years of work, nimble despite their softness. "If the ranch runs debt," she said, "then tomorrow may be too late for the truth." Gideon looked at her for a long moment, then led her to the office. The room was small, crowded with papers, tobacco tins, old receipts, and a locked cabinet with a key hanging in plain sight. Clara said nothing about that. Men who trusted no one often trusted doors too much. She opened the first ledger. Gideon stood behind her while she turned pages. At first glance, the accounts looked like ordinary failure. Poor cattle prices, feed costs, bank interest, medicine, equipment repairs, taxes, hired men leaving, freight charges rising. But ordinary failure had rhythm. It moved like weather. This ledger moved like a man limping on purpose. Clara's eyes slowed. "Who is Silas Varn?" Gideon leaned against the doorframe. "Banker. Owns the note on this place." "And Abel Trask?" "Cattle buyer. Do they know each other?" Everyone in Mercy Crossing knows everyone. That is not what I asked. Gideon straightened. Clara turned the ledger toward him. Your sale weights drop every third shipment, but the feed records do not. Freight charges rise on the same weeks the weights fall. The bank interest compounds 2 days before each cattle payment clears. And here she tapped a neat column. Your wife wrote the numbers differently from whoever entered these later. The room went still. Gideon stared at the page. Ruth kept the books before she took sick, Clara said. His voice was low. Yes. Then someone changed them after. Outside, the wind moved against the house. Somewhere in the dark, the windmill creaked once and fell silent. Gideon took the ledger from her, as if it might burn him. You've been here 1 hour. Numbers speak quickly when they are lying. He looked at her then, truly looked, and Clara saw the first crack in the wall he had built between them. Not affection, not trust. Need. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn. The ranch was blue with cold, the prairie holding its breath before sunrise. She dressed quietly, braided her hair, and walked the property with a lantern. She found the smokehouse door warped, the chicken coop mended with poor wire, the garden dead, but not beyond saving. At the corral, 6 horses stood where there should have been more. 2 had saddle sores. 1 gray mare favored her left foreleg. The cattle in the south lot were thin but not starving. Their eyes were clear. Their hides were not poor enough to match the ranch's debt. By the windmill, Clara stopped. The tower was not broken from age. The brake chain had been wired tight to keep the blades from turning. The water trough beneath it was dry, but the earth 10 feet beyond showed dampness where overflow had seeped into the ground from a buried crack. Someone had been letting the ranch believe it had less water than it did. She crouched, pressed 2 fingers into the soil, and lifted mud. Gideon found her there, as the sun rose. You make a habit of digging before breakfast? He asked. I make a habit of checking whether a dying ranch is being helped into its grave. He followed her gaze to the windmill. His face darkened. That chain was loose last week. It is tight now. No one comes out here unless... He stopped. Unless? Clara asked. His jaw worked. Unless they know I'm in town. That afternoon, Abel Trask came to buy cattle. He arrived on a bay gelding with silver on the bridle and confidence sitting fat under his vest. He had a handsome face in the way certain men did when they had never been told no by anyone poor. His eyes flicked to Clara and widened with amusement. Well now, he said, stepping down. Gideon, you didn't say your new wife was such a substantial blessing. The hired boy near the barn lowered his head to hide a grin. Clara stood beside the porch, a basket of mending in her arms. She felt Gideon's anger before she saw it, but she spoke first. Mr. Trask, she said pleasantly, a blessing's worth is usually measured by what it saves a man from losing. I trust you brought honest scales today. Trask's smile thinned. Gideon looked at her sharply. Trask laughed once. Sharp tongue for a new bride. Only when dull men require it. The hired boy choked on air. Trask did not laugh again. He inspected the cattle, complained of poor condition, quoted a price so low. Clara looked at Gideon to see if the man would flinch. Gideon did not. That was worse. He was used to insult, disguised as business. Clara walked to the scale wagon where Trask's man had set the weights. She watched the process, saying nothing until the 3rd steer. Stop. Trask turned. Pardon? Your weight arm is set short. His man froze. Clara stepped closer. There is a filed notch under the balance point. It will undercount by 40 to 60 pounds per animal, depending on the load. Trask's eyes went flat. Gideon crossed the yard in 3 strides. You sure? He asked. Clara lifted the iron arm and showed the bright scrape beneath the dust. I am. For a moment, no one moved. Then Gideon took the scale ticket from Trask's man and tore it in half. Get off my land. Trask's smile returned, but it had no warmth left in it. Careful, Holt. Men with notes due ought not get proud. Men with false scales ought not speak of pride. Trask mounted slowly. His gaze moved to Clara. Mercy Crossing can be a hard place for women who stick their noses into men's business. Clara looked up at him. Then Mercy Crossing will have to make room. By sunset, the whole ranch knew. Eli followed Clara from room to room, asking how she had seen the notch, whether she had ever caught thieves before, and whether all bankers were crooks. Gideon told him not to pester her, but he did not tell the boy she was wrong. That night, after Eli slept, Gideon brought 3 more ledgers to the kitchen table. Clara made coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe and worked by lamplight. Gideon sat across from her, silent, watching her turn pages. He did not look at her waist now. He looked at her hands. The same hands the town had dismissed as soft and useless moved with astonishing precision, tracing ink, comparing dates, catching tiny differences in pressure and slant. At midnight, she found the second wound. "Your land survey changed." Gideon rubbed his eyes. "No." "Yes." Clara laid 2 maps side by side. "This older copy shows your North Creek Bend inside Holt land. This newer bank copy shifts the boundary south by nearly 40 acres. That creek feeds the winter pasture, and if it belongs to someone else, you must pay access." His face went pale under the tan. "I've been paying Varn a water fee for 2 years." Clara nodded slowly. "For water that was already yours." Gideon stood so quickly, his chair struck the floor. Silas Varn was Ruth's cousin. Then he knew where to find her papers. His hands curled into fists on the table. Clara saw rage in him, but behind the rage was something more dangerous. Shame. He had believed himself foolish for failing. A proud man could survive poverty. It was harder to survive the thought that grief had made him blind. "They did this after she died," he said. "Perhaps before," Clara said gently. "If she was sick, she may have seen pieces and not had strength to finish." Gideon looked toward the dark hallway where Ruth's old room waited like a closed wound. "She told me something was wrong with the water fees. I told her to rest." Clara did not soften the truth. A lie would have been easier, but he had been fed enough lies. Then we find what she saw. For 3 days, Clara turned the ranch from a place of mourning into a place of search. She opened trunks, sorted receipts, cleaned shelves, mended curtains, washed floors, and made order where grief had let dust settle. Eli became her shadow. He fetched string, held papers flat, and learned to read dates. Gideon rode fences by day and sat with ledgers by night, his silence changing from suspicion to concentration. They found Ruth's handwriting on old invoices. They found freight receipts charged twice. They found a bank notice dated on a Sunday, when no mail ran. They found Trask's cattle tickets matching deposits in Silas Varn's handwriting. But the missing survey remained gone. Without it, the creek claim would be harder to prove. On the 4th evening, rain came. It struck the roof in hard silver lines and turned the yard to black mud. The wind found every crack in the house. Eli sat near the stove with the yellow dog's head in his lap, while Clara patched Gideon's torn coat. Gideon stood at the window, watching lightning reveal the windmill. "You don't have to keep working," he said. Clara did not look up. "The coat does not know I am tired." He turned from the window. "Why did you answer the agency notice?" The needle paused. There it was, the question he had avoided because it might make her human. Clara drew the thread through wool. "My father died owing rent on a place that never belonged to him. My mother took in washing until her lungs failed. I sewed dresses for women who pinched my sleeves and asked if I wished I could fit into something pretty. When the agency said a rancher needed a wife who could work and did not expect courting, I thought work might be kinder than pity." Gideon's expression shifted. "Was it?" She gave a small, tired smile. "Ask me after your banker stopped stealing from us." "Us." The word sat between them, quiet and dangerous. Before Gideon could answer, a crash split the night. The barn. Gideon ran first. Clara followed, lifting her skirt from the mud. Rain soaked her hair and dress in seconds. Lightning flashed again, showing the barn door banging open, horses screaming inside. The gray mare had broken loose and tangled her injured leg in a fallen section of stall gate. Eli appeared on the porch behind them, shouting, but Clara ordered him back with a voice that cut through storm. Gideon reached for the mare's halter. She reared, wild with pain. "Wait!" Clara cried. Gideon froze. Clara moved slowly into the stall, rain dripping from her sleeves. She did not look at the horse's eyes. She watched the ears, the shoulders, the tremor in the leg. "Easy, Juniper," she murmured, though no one had told her the mare's name. She had heard Eli whisper it that morning. The mare snorted. Clara kept speaking, low and steady. She placed one broad hand against the animal's neck and waited until the trembling eased. Then she nodded to Gideon. "Lift the gate on my count." Together, they freed the mare. Clara bound the leg with strips torn from her own petticoat, then mixed a poultice from vinegar, salt, and herbs in Ruth's old cupboard. Gideon watched her work in the lantern glow, rain sliding down his face, something like awe replacing the harsh lines around his mouth. "Where did you learn horses?" he asked. "From people who thought I was too large to ride and useful enough to hold the lead rope." The mare lived. By morning, so did something else. Respect. Not full trust yet, not love, but respect had roots, and roots could split stone. The next Sunday, they rode to Mercy Crossing for church. Clara wore a dark green dress she had altered from Ruth's trunk, letting out seams, changing the bodice, adding clean cuffs. It was plain, but it fit her, as if she had decided her body deserved cloth instead of apology. The town watched her enter. Mrs. Pike whispered. The judge's wife stared. Abel Trask stood near the church steps with Silas Varn, the banker. Varn was thin, silver-haired, and polished as a church bell, with hands too clean for a town built on dust. "Mrs. Holt," Varn said smoothly, "I trust the ranch is not too much strain." Clara met his eyes. Not the ranch. A flicker. Only a flicker. But she saw it. During the sermon, Eli slipped his hand into hers. Gideon saw it from the other side of the pew. His throat moved once, as if swallowing something too large for him. After church, Varn approached Gideon with a folded notice. "Your note comes due in 6 weeks," he said. "I hoped marriage might steady your household, but sentiment does not settle accounts." Gideon took the paper. Clara looked at it before he could fold it away. The interest was wrong. Again. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Mr. Varn," she said, "do you calculate by calendar days or by greed?" The churchyard went silent. Varn's face hardened by degrees. "Excuse me?" "This interest includes 8 days not yet passed." Gideon looked down. So did half the men nearest them. Varn's lips thinned. "A clerical error." "Then Mercy Crossing is blessed," Clara said. "Its banker makes errors only in his own favor." Someone laughed before fear could stop them. Varn stepped closer. "You are new here, Mrs. Holt. You may wish to learn which doors remain open to women who speak carefully." Clara folded the notice and handed it back. "I learned long ago, Mr. Varn, that a closed door is often hiding something worth finding." That afternoon, Gideon did not scold her. He drove home in silence, but halfway across the prairie, he pulled the wagon to a stop. "I should have defended you." Clara looked at him. "Yes." The words struck him harder than comfort would have. "I'm not used to anyone standing beside me," he said. "Then practice." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. That night, Gideon took Ruth's old Bible from the mantel. He opened it not for prayer, but because Clara had noticed a pressed blue ribbon marking the back cover. Inside lay a folded scrap of paper. Not the survey. A note. Gideon read it aloud, his voice rough. "Gid, if I cannot make you listen while I am standing in front of you, maybe paper will do it after. The creek is ours. My father kept the original survey in the clock because he never trusted banks. If Silas says otherwise, do not sign. Ruth." The clock. All three turned toward the tall walnut clock in the parlor, silent since Ruth's death. Gideon crossed the room as if afraid the floor might vanish. He opened the clock case. Behind the pendulum, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a survey map, a deed copy, and 3 letters from Silas Varn to Abel Trask. Clara did not touch them at first. Some discoveries belonged to the dead before the living. Gideon held the papers with shaking hands. Eli whispered, "Aunt Ruth knew." "Yes," Clara said. "She knew." The boy's face crumpled, and nobody listened. Gideon closed his eyes. Clara knelt in front of Eli, though the movement was not graceful, and her knees protested against the floor. "Sometimes people speak truth before others are ready to hear it," she said. "That does not make the truth smaller." Eli looked at Gideon. Gideon knelt too. "I should have listened," he said to the boy. "To her, to you, to the land, to all of it." Eli threw himself into Gideon's arms. Clara rose and turned away, giving them privacy. But Gideon reached out and caught her hand before she could leave. Not tightly, not claiming, asking. She stayed. The next weeks moved with the speed of a storm gathering over dry land. Gideon rode to Fort Laramie for a lawyer named Beatrice Caldwell, a widow with steel-gray hair and a reputation for making dishonest men sweat through clean shirts. Clara remained at the ranch with Eli and 2 loyal hands Gideon had rehired after showing them the false scale arm. Trask came twice. The first time, he found Clara on the porch with a shotgun across her lap and a ledger open beside her. "You expecting trouble?" he asked. "No," she said. "I am expecting you. Trouble usually has more courage." He rode away without dismounting. The second time, he brought 2 men at dusk. Clara had already moved the horses to the upper pasture and sent Eli to the cellar with the dog. She stood in the yard holding a lantern, her green dress dark against the red sky. "You are a stubborn woman," Trask called. "I have been called worse by better men. We only want the papers." "Then you should have stolen them before I learned where Gideon keeps the rifle." One of Trask's men shifted in the saddle. From the barn loft, old Caleb Mercer, a former ranch hand who owed Ruth a kindness, cocked a shotgun. The sound carried. Trask's face changed. Clara lifted the lantern higher. "Ride back to town and tell Mr. Varn that Mrs. Holt is too heavy to scare easy." That line traveled through Mercy Crossing by morning. By then, Gideon was back with Mrs. Caldwell. The lawyer spent 2 days at the kitchen table with Clara. The ledgers, the survey, the letters, and the bank notices. She asked questions fast. Clara answered faster. Gideon watched them build the case like 2 carpenters framing a house. At the end of the second day, Mrs. Caldwell leaned back and smiled. "Mrs. Holt, had you been born with fewer obstacles, you would have made a dangerous attorney." Clara threaded a needle without looking down. "I was born with obstacles enough to become dangerous anyway." The hearing took place in the Mercy Crossing Courthouse on a hot Tuesday in September. The room filled before 9. People came for scandal, for curiosity, for the pleasure of seeing a proud banker challenged, and, Clara suspected, to see whether the large young woman from the stagecoach would embarrass herself in public. She wore the green dress again. Her hair was pinned simply. Gideon stood beside her in his best black coat, the tear she had mended invisible, unless one knew where to look. Eli sat in the front row with Caleb Mercer, holding Ruth's Bible in his lap. Silas Varn arrived with Abel Trask and a lawyer from Cheyenne, who looked bored until Mrs. Caldwell began laying out evidence. First came the altered interest notices. Then, the double freight charges. Then the cattle tickets with false weights. Then the scale arm. Then the letters. The room shifted with each piece. Amusement faded. Whispering stopped. Men who had taken loans from Varn leaned forward. Women who had buried husbands, raised children, and signed papers they were told not to read, watched Clara with a new kind of attention. Varn's lawyer tried to dismiss her. "Mrs. Holt is not a surveyor, banker, or cattleman," he said. "She is a seamstress brought from Kansas by marriage arrangement. Her interpretations are hardly—" "Careful," Judge Marlowe said. But Clara had already risen. Mrs. Caldwell touched her sleeve, then let her go. Clara faced the court. "I am a seamstress," she said. "That means I know when edges do not meet. I am a bookkeeper. That means I know when numbers limp. I am a ranch wife. That means I know the difference between a failing property and a property being bled. And I am a woman who has spent her life being underestimated by men who thought size was the same as stupidity." The courtroom held its breath. She walked to the evidence table and lifted Ruth's original survey. "This map proves the North Creek belongs to Holt's Ladder. This letter proves Mr. Varn knew it. These cattle tickets prove Mr. Trask underpaid for stock using a rigged scale. These bank notices prove interest was calculated before it was due. If I am wrong, then every false mark here must have accidentally benefited the same 2 men for 3 straight years." No one laughed then, not even Trask. Judge Marlowe took the papers into chambers for 1 hour. It felt like 10 years. When he returned, his face was grave. He ruled the creek boundary valid. He suspended the banknote pending criminal investigation. He ordered restitution proceedings against Varn and Trask. He referred the false weights to the territorial marshal. And before he dismissed the court, he looked over his spectacles toward Clara. "Mrs. Holt," he said, "this court recognizes that without your attention, these frauds may have continued until Holt's Ladder was lost." Clara did not cry. She had promised herself not to cry in Mercy Crossing. But Eli did. He ran to her and wrapped both arms around her waist in front of the whole town. This time, no one laughed. Gideon came to her slowly, as if approaching holy ground. "I married you for help," he said, voice rough enough that only those nearest could hear. "Yes," Clara said. "I was a fool. Yes." A sound moved through the courtroom, half laughter, half relief. Gideon took off his hat. "I do not want a contract wife." Clara's heart beat once, hard. He looked at Eli, then back at her. "I want a partner. In the ranch, in the house, in every hard season that comes. If you are willing." The whole room disappeared except for his face. Clara thought of the stagecoach, the whispers, the judge's office, the cold kitchen, the ledgers, the storm, Ruth's hidden note, Eli's hand in hers. She thought of every person who had looked at her and seen too much body and too little worth. Then she looked at Gideon Holt, who had finally learned to see. "I will stay," she said, "but my name goes on the ranch papers." Gideon's scar pulled into a real smile. It already should have. By winter, Holt's ladder no longer looked like a dying place. The windmill turned freely over the North Trough. The creek watered the winter pasture without a fee paid to any thief. Caleb Mercer returned full-time, bringing 2 sons and 4 good horses. Mrs. Caldwell found buyers in Cheyenne who paid honest weight for Holt cattle. The bank in Mercy Crossing changed hands after Silas Varn left town under martial escort, wearing the stunned expression of a man who had believed respectability could hide rot forever. Abel Trask's silver bridle was sold at auction to pay a portion of what he owed. Clara bought it for $1 and hung it in the barn. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. The house changed too. Curtains were washed. The garden was turned. The clock was repaired. And when it struck the hour again for the first time, Gideon stood beneath it, with his hand on Eli's shoulder, and wept without shame. Clara sang when she needed dough. Not every day, not to replace Ruth, never that. She sang because the house no longer punished joy for entering. In spring, Gideon took Clara to Mercy Crossing in the black wagon, now painted and repaired. She wore a blue dress of her own making, cut to fit her body without apology. When she stepped down in front of Haskell's feed store, the same men who once stared at her waist removed their hats. Mrs. Pike hurried across the street with a jar of peach preserves and a face full of embarrassment. "Mrs. Holt," she said, "I hope you'll forgive some of the foolish things said when you first arrived." Clara accepted the jar. "Foolish things are common," she said. "Learning better is rarer." At the mercantile, a young woman with round cheeks and nervous hands approached while Gideon loaded flour. "My aunt says I should not take work at the livery," the girl whispered. "She says girls shaped like me ought to stay where folks can't look too close." Clara studied her, seeing the familiar bend in the shoulders, the old wish to shrink. "What is your name?" "Annie." "Annie, the world will look whether you hide or not. Make it look at what your hands can do." The girl swallowed, then nodded. Gideon heard. He said nothing until they were riding home. "You know," he said, "Mercy Crossing is more afraid of you than it ever was of me." Clara looked at the prairie, green now with new grass. "No," she said, "it is only afraid I will teach its women to count." Gideon laughed then, full and startled, and the sound rolled across the wagon seat like weather breaking. That summer, Holt's ladder held its first harvest supper since Ruth's death. Neighbors came from 10 miles in every direction. Some came because they admired Gideon. More came because they wanted to see the woman who had taken on a banker with a needlewoman's eyes and won. Tables were set beneath cottonwoods. Lanterns hung from branches. Children chased each other past the barn. The yellow dog slept under Eli's chair, fat from scraps and importance. At sundown, Gideon stood and raised a tin cup. "This ranch was nearly lost," he said. "I blamed drought, prices, sickness, and bad luck." Some of that was true. Most of it was easier than admitting I had stopped looking closely after Ruth died. The gathering quieted. Gideon turned toward Clara. Then Clara came. "I thought I had asked for hands. God sent me eyes and a backbone, and more mercy than I deserved." Clara felt heat rise in her face. Eli jumped up beside him. "She saved Juniper too," he announced. Laughter broke out. "And she makes biscuits," Caleb added. "Better than Ruth's?" someone called, then looked horrified at himself. Clara looked toward Eli. The boy considered the question with solemn care. "Different," he said, "but they both taste like home." That was when Clara cried. "Not much," just enough for Gideon to see and take her hand under the table. As darkness settled, Eli fell asleep on a quilt near the porch. The guests drifted away. Lanterns burned low. Clara stood at the fence, looking over the land that now carried her name beside Gideon's. He came to stand beside her. "Do you ever regret answering that notice?" he asked. She watched the wind move through grass that had survived drought, theft, and neglect. "I regret that your letter said nothing about broken windmills, crooked bankers, rigged scales, storm-mad horses, or a boy who asks more questions than a judge." Gideon smiled. "Anything else?" She looked at him then. "I regret you did not mention that you could learn." His hand found hers. "I'm still learning." "Yes," Clara said, "but you are no longer slow enough to be hopeless." Above them, the repaired windmill turned steadily in the night breeze. Inside the house, the clock struck 9. Its sound traveled through open windows, across the porch, over the yard, and into the pasture where the creek moved unseen, but certain in the dark. Years later, people in Mercy Crossing would tell the story differently depending on who was speaking. Some said Gideon Holt's mail-order wife saved his ranch. Some said a seamstress exposed the biggest fraud the county had ever seen. Some said Silas Varn made the mistake of underestimating a woman who knew how to read both stitches and numbers. Eli, grown tall and broad-shouldered, told it best. He said a woman stepped off a stagecoach while the whole town laughed at the size of her body, and by the time she was done, they had learned to measure the size of her courage instead. And Clara Bell Holt, whenever she heard that version, would shake her head and tell him not to make her sound grander than she was. But she never told him he was wrong. A home can begin to heal when one person is willing to look closely, work honestly, and treat forgotten people with respect. Clara's courage reminds us that worth is not measured by appearance, but by the good our hands do, the truth we protect, and the kindness we leave behind. Sometimes, the heart finds family, where it first expected only hardship. Please note, this story was created and fictionalized by AI for entertainment, while also sharing a positive life lesson.